Hello, everybody. Tommy Tables here with another genre, guys. And this one I'm really excited about. It is probably, I guess you could say, a very, very prescient movie. It was a blast to watch. I had seen it before, but it was really, really great to see it again. And so without further ado, I will be presenting you with the topic and the title, which is State and Maine. So this was a recommendation from Mr. Wasserman's Ghost. And Lou, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose this film?
Well, it really follows in quite a tradition of Hollywood looking at itself with a somewhat jaundiced eye. I mean, you can go back to really A Star is Born, or certainly The Stuntman. I don't know how many people remember the TV series Bracken's World. There have been a lot of movies where Hollywood takes a look at itself. Never quite as incisively as this, because, of course, it's made by a very much an insider and an outsider in Hollywood, and that's David Mamet, who is a great playwright who also wound up writing a lot of good movies and directing several, including this one. And it's about a movie company on location, and they're in New England, and they get, for reasons we'll go into, run out of town in this town they're using as their location and have to go into another one in a big hurry. And hilarity ensues, as they say.
And of course, joining us once again tonight is the inestimable Lou Wasserman's Ghost and the indefatigable Lorn Conner.
I wasn't aware that I was indefatigable, but okay, I'll take it.
I was just running. I was just running with the eyes today.
You could have picked worse, Lauren. I mean,
Absolutely.
Well,
So, State and Maine. What can we say about this film? As Lou Wasserman's Ghost so aptly pointed out, it is a movie about Hollywood looking at itself, and it is just, in the pre-show chat, I just mentioned the word, and I've got to say it again. It's a prescient movie, for better or for worse. I remember seeing this for the very first time around when it came out, actually, and walking away thinking, is Hollywood really like that? Like, I mean, this seems very, it seems very kind of trumped up. It seems very, cynical, and I'm sure it can't be that bad. And then as the years have gone by and as the scandals have unfolded, coming back to watch it again, you realize that it seems to be a very, very accurate picture.
well, I read a review from Roger Ebert back in the day, and he liked it. And he had a great line about how the director is fighting all these day-to-day problems. And the line says, those details are more important to Walt Price than anything else in his movie because they are today's problems. The long view is quickly abandoned on location. And I thought, how many over-budget reshoot movies do we know of recently where that certainly was the case? It's get through the day, not get through the entire war, exactly.
So what do you think about it, Lauren?
I'd never seen this movie before, and so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I enjoyed it quite a lot, but primarily because I thought each of the characters in their roles were playing their roles perfectly. You could see that the producer is obsessed with getting the movie done on time and hopefully under budget. You have the director who is having to deal with the egos of all of these different people. He reacts to different people depending on the situation and how much he needs them. And I thought that was very apt. I thought Macy was great in that. I thought, I'm not a terribly huge Alec Baldwin or Sarah Jessica Parker fan, but I thought Sarah Jessica Parker was hilarious in that she has this crisis suddenly of faith about appearing nude in this movie because she suddenly found religion, which she's willing to
somebody
abandon.
says, I don't know why she's worried the entire American movie-going audience could draw her boobs from memory because they've seen them so many times.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
And then the people playing the town people, which is that second picture on the poster down there, Charles Durning and Patty Lupone and everybody's favorite agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., at least mine, Clark Gregg, they're also perfect to it. Because, again, everybody in this movie has their own personal motivation, and none of them really coincide, except that they're all making the movie together one way or another.
Yeah, and so none of those motivations are of any sort of virtuous bent, except for perhaps, oh gosh, her name.
Annie.
Annie, yeah, Annie. But I mean, on the subject of Clark Gregg, I was surprised when I went back and I saw that he was in this. I'm like, wait a minute, that's Agent Coulson. And I'm going to be honest, his performance as Agent Coulson kind of colored my impression of him as an actor so much that I couldn't really take him as a bad guy in this. I mean, I don't even know if he was a bad guy. I mean, they're all pretty
He's
bad.
just a very selfish guy, is what he
Yeah.
is. He plays a local politician, for those who haven't seen the film, whose whole purpose involved in this movie is what can it do for him?
Yeah.
To the point where his girlfriend dumps him. For Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I cannot remember ever playing a soft, gentle, sympathetic guy in any other movie I've seen him in. He's always kind of these hard-edged, bordering on nutcase people in a lot of these movies he's been in. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but never this low-key and sensitive, and he's great at it. And it makes you wonder why they didn't use him more that way.
I did think it was a little amusing that as the writer of the piece, he's the only one that really seems to have a moral center. And that did seem like that's convenient for the writer.
Yeah, well, and
Well-
of course, the movie is made by the writer. So anyway,
Mhm.
Which is another funny part about it, is that you have he's obviously the writer. He's having to make adjustments to the script on the fly, but you also have the talent constantly saying, I would never say that. Let's rewrite it here.
yeah, which is very real.
Yep.
I
So-
think I told the story once. I was on the set on Cheers, and Rhea Perlman, who's a wonderful actress, is giving a line up in that upper left, if you're looking at the screen, not from stage, that sort of back area behind the bar. And the director, Jim Burrows, famous, wonderful director, says, no, wait, Rhea, come down stage 3 steps and then say that line. And she literally asked the ultimate question, well, what's my motivation? And his answer was, because I can't see you up there. Which, when you think about it, is not only wonderful and straight and whatever, but it's what the actor wants to hear too. I want to be seen. So that's the way directors who are great directors work, and in a lesser way, the way that William Macy does in this as the director.
That was something that I thought in this movie, all of the actors had to be just licking their chops at these parts, because they were channeling people that they know in the business. It had to be a lot of red meat for them.
Oh yeah, and even people, again, lots of people playing against their usual type. Charles Durning usually plays kind of rough-edged, sometimes nasty, but at least hard people. And in this, he's this befuddled softy, and he's great at it. And Patti LuPone, who people may know was, I think, the original Evita on Broadway, and she plays this domineering sort of, I don't know, what would you say? Evita meets Martha Stewart, wife
Oh my
of his.
God.
And-
Historical Martha Stewart.
Yes,
Com-
exactly. You know, and
Completely renovates the house just to try and elevate her social position because of their proximity to the production.
right, and of course the mayor Durning is very much in demand by the movie company because they want all kinds of goodies and freebies to use the town.
Permits and
And we've avoided the big fact, which is how come they're suddenly in this town? And the reason is that their famous star, Alec Baldwin, has a penchant for, shall we say, younger women or maybe older girls. And in the previous town, he got caught with one and they were run out of town on a rail. And the reason they came to this town is because the movie they're making is called The Old Mill. And they heard there was a mill here they could shoot. Turns out the mill burned down in, quote, a series of suspicious fires.
and that keeps coming up, which is amazing. But okay, so for the members who are listening to this, I will just flat out say that this is a movie that you need to own. Like, this is fantastic. Like, this movie is pure gold from start to finish. I loved it, and I cannot recommend it enough. I was trying to think, like, who stole the show in this film, and I really had a hard time with it. Ultimately, I would have to give it to William Macy, because just the way he switches between deadpan to false concern, sort of treating Sarah Jessica Parker, for example, with kid gloves, trying to convince her to take her top off. And then
He makes an art form of insincerity.
it's amazing. And then, like his I guess his assistant director or grip or whatever the guy's position was, he's like,
Yeah, I think
my wife's
the,
going into
the black guy, the kind of location manager kind of guy, yeah,
the
or
location
AD.
manager guy, and he's like, my wife's going into labor. It's like, oh, is that
Oh yeah, the other,
professional or is that personal? Like, are we
Ah.
paying this guy?
the other great line that Ebert quotes from Macy as the director, when it says, "Of course he denies that he lies." Quote, "It's not a lie; it's a gift for fiction."
There's another line that I thought was good too that was talking about I'm gonna murder the quote, but they're talking about how something would never be resurrected, and they said that's what they said about Warner Brothers in 1985.
Yeah, there you go.
But I mean, it just I got to ask that $1 million question, Lou, and I'm sure all the members want to know. Given that you've dabbled in Hollywood a little bit, how accurate would you say this movie is to what you've seen?
Well, I will say any given episode in it is absolutely accurate, and having them all happen on the same picture is a horror I have not experienced, but could. And of course, that's what great movies do. They take a bigger story that theoretically has all kinds of offshoots and all kinds of backstories and all kinds of pieces, and you pick out the pieces that make your movie move along and work. And that's also what's so brilliant. It's like when I read Joe Wambaugh's police books, I know three-quarters of those anecdotes are real and have been told to him by another cop at some point during the way. They just put them all in the same book. I remember there was one where the cops picked up some crazy guys fighting, and they decided to pretend that where they were fighting was not in the city of L.A., but in the city of West Hollywood, and dropped them off with their weapons still in their hands in front of the West Hollywood police station and said, "Go in there and tell them what you did." And they just paused long enough to hear these screaming inside when they saw these guys walk in with these pipes and sticks, and then drove away. And I thought that had to have really happened. He couldn't have made that up. Well, all of this stuff has happened, I guarantee you. Whether it all happened on the same movie is another story, but that's the fun of Hollywood, is that we can condense all of it.
So, can I just say, was it just me, or did you guys find that perhaps and I'm not gonna, I really want to choose my words carefully here because every part of this movie was fun, was interesting, was enjoyable, but I almost felt as if the romance between Annie and the writer was kind of like the boring parts of the movie in a way. I just always wanted to see what was going on with the director, with the stars, with
Well, but see, if it was all that, you would have no pacing and no tension. You
Oh
got to
wait,
have contrast.
I know. Yeah.
By the way, you all know that the lady who plays Annie, Miss Pigeon, is David Mamet's wife.
Is she?
Yes.
And I would actually disagree with that assessment because for me, I thought the love story between Joe and Annie was the heart of the picture.
Yeah.
Because you have all of these phony people that are here for no altruistic reason whatsoever. And Joe's a guy who's creative. He has a romantic soul. He doesn't really belong with these people. And he kind of falls in love with this town and this lady here. That's where his heart belongs. And I think that that's what he realizes as he's going through this whole ridiculous production.
And I think also she and some of the other people, some of the minor townspeople who are in on the gag when they pull off this major con game that they pull off, they belie the attitude of the Hollywood people that, oh, these are a bunch of rubes and they're not very sophisticated and they don't know how to, like we do in the real world. She does, certainly. And the fact that she is perfectly happy to be there and not in New York and not in L.A. and not anywhere else where her brains and her skills and her talent could certainly take her is a wonderfully refreshing thing, too, because most movies are all about, I want to get out of this bum little town and get to the big game, not
Which
here.
is what her ex-fiance Clark Gregg wanted. And you guys are 100% right. And I'm not saying that these were boring parts.
No, I understand.
It's the slower parts of the movie. How about that? But it was absolutely necessary for the film. It was the core of the film. I agree. But gosh, I could have watched so much more of just the Hollywood interactions. Like everybody was pitch perfect in this. My goodness. Alec Baldwin. Oh man.
You have to wonder how close to home that part was for him.
Everybody needs a hobby.
Yeah.
About his penchant for age girls. And I mean,
we haven't explained the title of the movie is The Corner of State Street and Main Street, which is where the excrement hits the aerator on this whole issue of Alec Baldwin, because that's where he has a car accident with the local town girl who's basically seducing him before he can seduce her in the car, and thus bringing to light that, he's done it again, and what the heck do we do now?
It's it really is like there is no one innocent except for those two the two characters, Annie and
Joe.
Joe and Annie, yeah. And even Joe, like that was one of the things that maybe perhaps part of the issue I would take up with the ending of the film is when he is sort of, goes before the court to give his deposition, and then he discovers that not all is as it seemed. And my only sort of quibble was if he hadn't overheard that conversation while, or had that off random conversation with that stranger while he was about to get onto that train, and he would have been sitting in that stage for a long, long time.
Well,
Yeah, it's kind of a writer's cheat, but this is written
Yeah.
by a playwright, and this movie very much felt like a stage production.
Yeah.
And so I think you can get away with that kind of thing in a play where sometimes you have to buy into it as the audience. You got to give that to the production to get the story. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
when people take plays and turning into movies, the phrase they use is we got to open it up. And sometimes that's overdone. I think this is a good balance between, and of course, he has his own unique style of dialogue. For those who don't think they know Mamet, I'll bet most of you have seen Glengarry Glen Ross, the one about the real estate salesman. That's him. And as I was mentioning before we started, if you want to see one of the best caper pictures ever, and it's one we should do someday when we've got enough time between this and another Mamet, it's a picture called Heist with Gene Hackman and Danny DeVito and Delroy Lindo, and it's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant robbery picture with a twist. But his dialogue is unique. He has people speaking both in ways that real people don't talk, and you buy them as real people. It's just something about the phrasing and the pacing of how he writes.
it's a little bit like the 40s style screwball comedies, a little bit.
Yes. Oh, there's Heist. Yeah, there you go. What a great picture that is. And Rebecca Pigeon is in that one too. That's right. Considerably more violent, and so be prepared for that if that isn't your thing. But wow. One of Hackman's last movies, and I'd say one of his very best.
Better than
Anyway,
Superman 3.
no Miss Tessmacher.
And then here's Glengarry Glen Ross. But I mean,
Also Alec Baldwin, but Jack Lemmon and Al Pacino and all kinds of great people in that.
Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey, yes.
It's, I have to say that between this movie and the book you recommended, Lou, which I'm going to throw up on the screen right now.
This is Mamet's newest book. He's written a few, and it's all about his experiences in Hollywood. And anybody out there, and I know if you're watching this show, you're into the movies, you got to get this book. And as I told Tommy, get it hardcover. I'm a Kindle kind of guy. But this guy illustrates the book, as you can see in that little picture, with his own little cartoons. And those are awfully darned hard to see on a Kindle or on a tablet. But it's worth buying the print version for that, I think.
And it's a really interesting book. He's got a unique type of writing. Once you get into the flow of it, you can get to it. But it feels like everything this guy writes is gold, basically.
He makes you want to know what somebody's going to say next.
Yeah.
As I've said before, the first trick to anything is to get people to keep turning the pages, or especially in this age of streaming, to stop clicking away to something else.
So back to the movie, State and Main. And this is going to be, and I apologize in advance for this because this is going to be a hard question, but I want to hear from both of you some of the other things in this movie that particularly stood out or that you particularly enjoyed or liked. Why don't we start with you, Lorn?
There's this pothole that they keep focusing on as cars hit it throughout. It's kind of this visual gag, but it actually is important. It's a little like Chekhov's gun. When they keep showing this, eventually it's going to become important, and it does. It sort of leads to all of the trouble and eventually the climax of the movie, and it's just kind of a fun visual gag. There's other things, but I think there were two performances that really stood out for me. One was the William H. Macy performance. We already talked about that. He's a brilliant actor. I love how he becomes the chameleon to every single person that he interacts with to get this picture done, because that is his biggest priority.
I was going to say that is the descriptor that I was looking for. Like the way he becomes a chameleon and the way he becomes all things to all people, whenever, like to whoever he's talking to. And the only time you see his true self is when he's talking to that assistant producer who's trying to get out of the picture because his wife is giving birth.
You
Yeah.
know, I want to. I guess there was another performance I should mention. I was going to say Philip Seymour Hoffman because I'd never seen him like Lou says in a role like this, and I thought it was nice to see him playing a sweet role. I thought
Yes.
he carried it very
And
well.
convincingly, especially since you come into the picture with your stereotype of the guys he normally plays, and you sit there going, "Oh, really? Wow, there's sort of more to this guy than I ever thought there was." Not that he isn't brilliant in those other things.
I also want to give an honorable mention to David Paymer because
Yes, yes.
he is such a mercenary producer, and it is so sharp.
And
And
yet
there's
not it's a stereotype that the producer's a hard ass who only cares about the money, but he takes it beyond the stereotype so that you really, 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 really don't like him as a person, you know?
Well, there's this other gag that's involving him trying to get this product placement within the movie that makes
Yes.
absolutely no sense
Yeah.
because it's a period piece. And
Yes.
how he actually pulls that off is another great gag. I love it.
And I think the fact that he's doing it before you really realize, you don't really realize it's a period piece until you see them in costume later in the movie. And Alec Baldwin's a fireman, and the town is, I don't know what era, but maybe even as far back as 16 or 1700s. The other fun moment, I think, for me, or a running gag, is that whole issue of the firehouse. They have this plan for this long crane shot that's going to go through the window of the fireplace house to find them. The problem is the firehouse in this town has a stained glass window of a fire dog, a Dalmatian, in the window. They can't knock it out, but can they? But what if we did it by accident? What if we made it look like we, oops, sorry, and we rebuilt it? All to get that one shot. So, single-mindedness of purpose. And a friend of mine in the business who was a sound recordist worked on. Do you remember the Clint Eastwood movie where at the end there's this massive shootout with this bus that they're in, him and his former wife? I forget what the movie's called now. I can't think. Gauntlet, I think. The Gauntlet. And it was downtown San Diego, and there's like 43 million squibs and bullet holes in this massive chase scene. And they're shooting it with like three cameras, and it's basically one of those you better get it the first time because to reset all of that's going to take days. And they shoot it, cut, print, and my friend, who's very short, comes running up to Eastwood, who's very tall. He's taller than any of you realize until you're standing next to him in person, which I've done in passing on the back lot at Warner Brothers. He runs up, he says, "Mr. Eastwood, I think you should know that over the end of that scene, there was some airplane noise of a plane flying over. You might want to do it again." And here is what Eastwood said to him, and it's so much in a different way the attitude of this guy. He said, "Son, what I'm doing here is building a brick wall, and it's not part of my job description to fall in love with any one of the bricks.
Ah.
You got to get to the next one. You got to get it done. You got to keep moving. You can't reshoot half the movie three times like some people we know do anyway.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
until recently. Well, on the subject of the running gag and the period piece, I'm going to spoil it a little bit for those of you who
Yeah.
haven't seen it, but you get snippets of the script throughout the movie. You hear Alec Baldwin and Sarah Jessica Parker and the writer speaking to them a little bit, and they're always coming up this line about Alec Baldwin's rugged, handsome character kind of approaching Sarah Jessica Parker, who's the romance interest, and he's like, "Sister, I've just come back from the fire." And you're like, you kind of hear that word sister, and you're thinking like, okay, I guess this is a period piece and whatever. And then there's this huge sort of side story about how they're trying to get her basically to go topless for the movie, and she's like, "I can't do it, but if you pay me an extra 800,000, I will," and whatnot. And then at the end of the film, you realize that the sister is literal because she's actually a nun.
Yes.
And so the entire thing was about getting a nun to show her breasts on screen.
And they keep saying that this movie is about purity. It's about second chances. So that
Yes.
plays into the script at the end where she's telling him there's always a second chance, It's like if you've sinned, you can go back to church. There's even a section where they show storyboards of this scene, and it's very explicit. It's like this is obviously the climax, if you will, of the movie.
Yeah.
And what everybody's paying to go see. So there you go.
They
It's about purity.
And I would also, when you're talking about great performances, these people that play the town people, the sheriff or the police chief or whatever he is, and those two guys that are just kind of watching everything, who are the funny down home Greek chorus of this movie, making their little wry comments about
Yeah,
these here city folk in our town.
Statler and Waldorf, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Only kindlier than Statler and Waldorf. But and then of course Durning and Lupone are just God, such fun. it's just there's so much to like in this thing, and it's aside from the great performances and the well-written characters, the story is something you follow because you want to know how it's going to turn out, and
Oh,
it doesn't turn out the way you thought it was turning out, nor the way anybody else in the movie but the couple people in the know thought it was going to turn out. So it's got that going for it too. We all like a switcheroo.
and so Lou, what about you? Like, what are some of the parts that really stand out for you that make this a favorite?
Well, gee, it's seeing things I've seen, and it's also, I got to say, when two people are talking in the foreground and the crew is doing stuff in the background, like in that kind of production office in the hotel, it's real. It's real. It has the same intensity and haphazardness all at the same time that real productions do. This is obviously, created for a story and not a real movie, but it's a pastiche, but not that far off the real thing as far as how the atmosphere is on a set.
I feel that Lou, as you were watching this film, this was you basically throughout the
Oh
entire.
no, I'm not in this movie. I'm not, my job, my character, my part in the movies is not in this movie. I would be the guy who happened to be in town on a vacation and said, "Oh, look, people from the
No, 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 no.
this."
If you look at the screen, this is the meme with Leonardo DiCaprio
Oh
from
yeah.
Wall Street being like, "Hey, I recognize that. I recognize that.
Hmm.
I recognize that."
So, one of the great gags in this movie involves when Sarah Jessica Parker is suddenly backing out of wanting to do this nude scene. They had previously gotten all of the, was it lilacs in town?
Yeah.
Yes.
And they had delivered them to her suite. And now she's panicking, and the director has to go and comfort her and make it feel like the entire production is behind her. We totally understand. And he says, basically, get me some more lilacs. Well, they've already taken all the lilacs that were in town, so he basically instructs his assistant, go take the lilacs out of her room and get them freshened up, put them in some cellophane, bring them back, put a card, and say that the producer had written this card saying that he supports her, and give them back to
Give her
her.
same flowers back twice. Yes.
Yep. And I thought this is also another one of those gags that's similar. Involves the fact that they're still trying to figure out, can we do this without the nude scene? They managed to do it without the nude scene, but they got the money. They got the money, even though they didn't want to pay her to do it. And when the writer figures out a way to not have to have that scene, that money comes in handy for bribing the politician.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but the money actually came from the product placement. So they managed to get a third party to give them the money that they used to bribe the politician to get them off their back so that the movie could be made. None of it came from the production itself.
And also, picking a number like that. Well, I'll do it for $800,000. Where did that come from? My God, that's uh,
And that the producer, when he threatens her agent, I thought that was a great
yeah,
scene too.
yeah.
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 And also
Marty.
the fact that the movie is called The Old Mill because the big moments happen at the old mill, and this town hasn't got a mill. What are we going to do?
Well, the first thing you got to do is change the title.
Yeah, exactly.
And that one point there where the one of the staff or the production staff was walking by William H. Macy, and she had a shirt on that said, "Does it have to be called the Old Mill?" And he's like,
Yes.
"Take it off. Take that off right now."
And I just want to reassure the audience of something. We aren't spoiling a tenth of this movie.
Yeah.
We're giving you the flavors so you'll go find all the other goodies yourself because you should.
Oh my
Ebert,
gosh.
Ebert used to say that a movie isn't about what it's about how it is about it. And I think this is a movie that perfectly captures that.
That's excellent. Yes. Well, and Mamet himself in that book, he talks about, he says, look, the first thing about movies is the pictures, not the words. It's picking the right shots and the right look and the right angle and the right sequence of shots to make it happen. And you know who we've neglected to mention much and who's wonderful in this too is Julia Stiles playing
Oh yeah.
the girl that's out to, as they say, well, Ebert here in this review says he'll have to move fast to seduce her before she seduces him. And then Ricky Jay, who's an old Mamet crony, as her father.
It was a smaller part, but she played it very well. And I mean, right off the bat, you saw her like the wheels grinding in her mind as she discovered Bob Berenger, Alec Baldwin was in town, and his reputation preceded him. And she knew exactly what she was doing
I,
to
I actually misread her character. I thought that she was planning to seduce him to blackmail him, and so I was waiting for her to drop another
Bingo.
shoe.
well, even that part near the end when she decides to come clean and confess, the way that came about.
Well, yeah, but I actually genuinely thought that she was just that she was playing him for some other benefit, and so the fact that that was actually just her wanting to seduce him came as a bit of a surprise to me.
Well, but I think she also wants to tell all her friends, I
Oh
screwed a
yeah.
movie star. So there's that going on for her, is the prestige, so to speak.
And I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that I liked about the movie overall was the effect, the way that Hollywood, how do I put this? Like the gravitational pull of Hollywood and how it can kind of distort everything wherever it is. You've got this small town, which on the surface, like right at the beginning of the movie, it's like something out of Leave It to Beaver, right? You have the doctor talking to the young girl as they're walking down the road, and then they pass William Macy and another member of his crew, and they're kind of looking at each other like, seriously? Is this actually real? And you just see the corrupting influence of Hollywood throughout the entire town, just warping everything in its, event horizon. It's
Well,
a
and the
strong
fact that
statement.
the people who are theoretically the most dogmatic about their position are very willing to change for a little bit of the old moolah, particularly Clark Gregg's character.
Oh, that was hilarious.
He comes off as this crusader, and oops, no, maybe not.
As he begins his run for Congress with
Yeah.
the bribery money. I mean, it's one of those you either laugh or you cry at how accurate it seems to be.
Well, and everybody from a politician to a small town mayor to a pushy wife of small town mayor to actor, director, producers, everybody in the movie is in a good way a stereotype of that type, and every one of them makes you think, you know what, all the rest of them are like that too.
Well, it's think about all of the commentary that we do on the movies that are doing poorly out there right now, and so much of it is ego driven.
Yeah.
And that's what this is showing, is that every one of these people has got an outsized ego.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yet somehow you've got to bring all of these people together in a massive production that has to have everything done on time and hopefully within or under budget. And it's kind of a miracle that any of these get made at all.
It's like a series of unfortunate events, and it also, I think, it's very telling in the sense that there were so many things that happened in this film that relied on something else. And if one of these little random occurrences hadn't happened, they wouldn't have reached the conclusion that they had. And so it also, I think, does a very good job of capturing just the randomness and bizarreness of just daily life, and how that can impact and how that can have a massive effect on your own career, your life, like whatever. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about this film. Like, I really can't. It was just so pitch perfect, like well done. And thank you again, Lou, for suggesting it.
Well, I always loved it, and I had recently rewatched it just on a whim and thought, wow, it's even better than I remembered it. And I think that is why when you said people should own it, because every 4 or 5 years you'll drag it out and say, hey, to somebody who hadn't seen it, let me show you something fun. And the best part is I do that with a lot of movies, and I enjoy them, but I know what's coming next. It's not quite the same thing. But this movie, you can enjoy it again all by yourself, even if you do know what's going on, because you're kind of waiting in glee for it to happen.
And there's so many details happening.
Oh,
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was going to say the guy that plays the doctor.
oh yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
yes.
Oh God, is he perfect? He's like something out of one of those old Pepperidge Farm commercials, and yet he's got some moxie, you know.
Yeah.
Well, the
Michael
great thing
Higgins is his name.
the great thing about him is that he's this character that seems to be this wise fellow, and the writer buys into it. And when he has a moment of crisis of conscience, I guess you would say, he turns to this doctor to say, "Look, can't you just tell me what to do? What's the right thing?" And
I looked up his character, and they gave a couple of quotes from the movie that'll give you an idea. The mailman says, "Doc, those pills you gave me, I'm not sure that they work. The doc says, well, I'm not sure either, but you don't hear me complain. Or there's a great one. They're talking about the fact that he wears a bow tie, and the doctor says, it's the truth. You should never trust anybody who wears a bow tie. Cravat's supposed to point down to accentuate the genitals. Why would you want to trust somebody whose tie points out to accentuate his ears? Anyway, I mean, all these, it's snappy patter, gang. Snappy patter and then some.
It is. And the
Oh,
dialogue.
did we
Sorry.
mention the mayor's name is George Bailey? Does that sound familiar, anybody? It's a Wonderful Life.
I didn't catch that.
I didn't catch that either. Oh my gosh.
Oh, here's a piece of dialogue. Walt Price, the director, says, would you like a cigar? And the mayor says, aren't these illegal? He says, why would they be illegal? Well, the trade embargo with Cuba. And Walt Price says, nobody tells me anything.
And again, this is William H. Macy being that chameleon, sucking up to the guy.
Yeah.
And then, he just turns around, and in this scene that I got on screen here, he's like complaining about the clothing production, like the art design. And he's like, did we pay someone to draw these? Like, it's just, his character is just so well done. I mean, going back to what you're saying, though, Lou, about the dialogue, we don't get dialogue like this anymore. And why is that?
Yeah. It's because there aren't that many Mamets in the world.
Yeah.
This guy just has a unique sense of the world that he knows how to put on the page and on the screen. Oh, I love this line from Anne's character, the girl. She says, everybody makes their own fun. If you don't make it yourself, it isn't fun, it's entertainment. And then the two of them talking. I love that they have these little dialogue snippets on IMDb. The writer and he says, you believe that? She says, I do if you do. He says, but it's absurd. She says, so's our electoral process, but we still vote.
Yeah.
It's not a political movie, but
Once again, the level of prescience in this film is off the charts. All of the themes in this film, I would say, have been addressed or exposed or brought to the surface in the intervening years since it started and today. Especially the stuff with Alec Baldwin and Julia Stiles. In the wake of Me Too and all of that, you sort of watch that and you're thinking like, ooh, you almost are like, I don't know if I should be laughing at this, right? Like, it's pretty wild. But no, this film, I don't know. I feel like a broken record. I keep repeating.
Oh, here's another wonderful moment. The writer says to her, ever wonder why the Dalmatian's the symbol of the firehouse? And she says, first organized fire department was on the border of Dalmatia and Sardinia in the year 642. He says, that's why it's the Dalmatian? She says, it was either that or the sardine. It's just a whole hell of a lot of fun, folks. It's a whole hell of a lot of fun on a subject we all have a fascination with, or you wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here.
I feel like it's a movie where it feels like required watching if you have any interest at all in what goes on behind the camera in Hollywood. And I mean, thank you, Lou, for kind of affirming my suspicions that everything that's happened in this movie has likely happened in real life.
Oh, absolutely. But not with as much fun.
Not with as much fun.
It's more painful in real life when this stuff happens.
A lot more stress.
And expensive.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I'm gonna spoil the final line of this movie, which is said by Alec Baldwin. As he's finishing a scene. Well, it beats working.
Here's another line. Walt Price says, we're going to sue you for $1 billion. Joe White says, what cause? He says, I don't need a cause. I just need a lawyer.
I need a lawyer. And I mean, that is so accurate. I mean, it's pretty wild. I'm sure Legal Mindset could attest to that, but you never need a case when you're a lawyer. You just make your own case, right? And there was another point that I wanted to ask you about, Lou. Have you guys ever had to refill Evian bottles and then sort of melt the caps on to save money?
Well,
you remember that part in the movie?
Yeah. See, look, you said you'd seen it once and then watched it again. I've seen it a couple of times. How many things in the average movie you see do you remember in this detail? That's how striking it is.
The one thing I will take issue with though is that when they're talking about getting Philip Seymour Hoffman's character a gift because he saved the movie, he saved them $800,000 because he was able to figure out a way to get Sarah Jessica Parker to not show her breasts. And they're like, that guy saved us 800 grand. Oh my God, we have to give him a gift or something. They, number one, he writes down a note to give to the associate to the grip to go and get him a gift, and on the note it says associate producer credit. But and I thought they were going to come back to that. I thought that would come and bite them in the butt again because that was hilarious. But the other thing that I take issue with, of course, is that they were like, we have to get him a bottle of maple syrup, of Vermont maple syrup, and as a
Yes.
Canadian, as you may be aware, I take strong issue with that. Maple syrup comes from Canada.
Speaking of strong, I actually have had bourbon aged in maple syrup barrels. So there you go. And it was good too. It was good.
No.
Oh, here you go. Here he gets a phone call from the producer before he actually shows up. He says, "It's Marty. He's on the coast." And the director, Bill Macy, says, "On the coast? Of course he's on the coast. Where would he be? The Hague?"
But then when Marty arrives, he's in this beat up, busted down blue van. What was the symbol? Like, what was the significance of that? Just it was too cheap to take like a taxi, or
Well, I think that was the taxi to get to this tiny little
Okay.
town. I think that was the only way to get there. They were so far off the beaten track.
right?
Was that idea? But anyway.
So, Lauren, as having seen this for the very, very first time, any other commentary or thoughts? Like, were you sort of like, were you in stitches? Were you amused? Like, did you get through this through one go, or?
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say that I was like completely rolling on the floor, but I thought that it was really incisive commentary on these. I don't want to phrase it this way, but these type of people, the people in these roles in Hollywood. I think this is, and what kept coming to mind is, I'll bet the actors had an awful lot of fun doing this.
Oh
because,
yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah. Well,
that had to be just a joy.
well, it's interesting. I'm looking at the list of the awards that it won and was nominated for. Best casting for a feature film, best ensemble cast, best acting by an ensemble, best ensemble cast performance.
No kidding.
I mean, it's not just about the individuals; it's about how well they play off of each other, and it was recognized for that.
Oh, the
Which
ensemble
it should
was
be.
brilliant.
Yes. Yes.
Like just everyone together. It was pitch perfect.
Well, it's as if they'd been playing this for a year on Broadway before they made the movie. They were also comfortable with and in sync with who they were and who they were in relationship to everybody else. That's hard to do on a short-term thing like a movie.
Something that just occurred to me. Do you remember the movie The Cooler?
Yes, 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 yes.
That's William H. Macy and Alec Baldwin too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Did that come after this or before this?
Well, we can certainly thank God there's this internet thing. We can look it up.
Let's look that up.
I think it must have been after, because I think that was like maybe
The
2005 or
Cooler
so.
is 2003.
Movie,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
2003 romance
and
comedy.
This is 2000, so it's 3 years later.
That's another great movie if you guys like these guys. The Cooler's pretty good.
Yes.
Well, audience, let us know what your thoughts are if you'd like us to speak to one of these other movies. So, The Cooler or Glengarry Glen Ross or The Heist, because man, those would be fun movies to talk about. I gotta
Oh,
say,
Yeah, we could have a Mamet Film Fest, and for God's sakes, read that book.
yes.
It is. If you want to ask, is this the way it really is? Oh boy, is that the way it really is. Oh my God, is that the way it really is? There's so many things in this crazy world of Hollywood that, I mean, I talked to a guy once and he was talking about pitching a movie script to a producer at a big studio. And the guy asked him, well, who would you see in it? And he said, well, I don't know if you could ever get them, but what about, well, I don't even want to mention like Meryl Streep for the role because you probably couldn't get her. He said, no, 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 go ahead. Tell me the people, It was like there was nothing off limits as far as reality because when you give them a script and they call you in theory because they've read it and you quickly realize, no, they haven't. When they say to you, tell me the story in your own words, and you're saying, there's 150 pages of my own words right there on the desk in front of you. What the hell else do you want? But no, so it's, supposedly when discussing the crazies of Hollywood, Roy Disney, not Walt, but Roy, said, quote, why do you think they call it this effing business? Uh, so there you go.
Lou,
Um,
I gotta say, there's something that makes me immeasurably happy inside to hear the affirmation that this actually is reflective of real life.
and wait a minute. Here's the other bigger thing that just occurred to me. Everybody knows. Everybody's aware of it. Even the people that are being utter a-holes know it and still do it.
Yeah.
Because by God, if I'm one of those, I'm going to be the best one of those that ever was. So, there's a certain level of commitment, and in some cases people should be committed, but that's never forget, for those few who don't know but love the song, that the Hotel California, where you can go in but you can never leave, that song was written about the state mental institution in Camarillo up the road from LA.
I'm
So that's what
not
the Hotel
aware.
California is. It's the nut house.
That makes a lot more sense. But guys, I just realized we haven't actually kind of settled on what sort of genre this
Oh, it's.
movie
I
is.
I think when I made a mediocre thumbnail, Hollywood looks at itself, and that's another thing. Why would you give away what a bunch of crazies you are by making this movie? I know why he'd make it, but what about the people who really put up the money? And their answer is, oh, who cares? Nobody will believe it, and it's a lot of fun. It'll get people to come watch it. It'll satisfy people's stereotypes of who we are, but we're not really like that. Oh yeah? Well, maybe so. The movie that maybe is closest to this in that way, although it's not as much of an ensemble, is The Stuntman with Peter O'Toole, which is also about a movie company on location and the crazy stuff that happens thereupon. It's a little more serious, and it's the music, which I think was Dominic Frontieri, is intentionally Fellini circus music. And that gives you a sense of the absurdity of this crazy business. It wouldn't have worked here, but it works in general.
I'd also want to mention Tropic Thunder just because I can't help myself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's
That,
very
that
much in that vein. Yeah,
that's one
that's
thing. That's one thing I thought this movie was actually missing, although I don't know how you would insert it in. Is I thought it would have been nice to see an editor trying to put this mess together, but
Oh, yeah, well,
that's for post production, and so you can't really fit that in there.
of course, on a lot of movies, he's there. I don't know if I've told it on this show, but I remember sitting in the booth at Cheers, just as a guest, and in walks the editor, and his name, it was Pam, believe it or not, a man, but his first name was Pam. Actually, it was M. Pam, but he went by Pam Blumenthal, and he was a famous, famous editor. And he would walk in. This is the first time he's seeing this episode, is the night they're shooting it, and he'd walk into the booth, pick the script up off the table, weigh it in his hand, and say, "Too long. It's too long." So it was his act. He did it every single time, but everybody loved it, and that's the editor gets to see all the mistakes and say, no, that mistake should have been left in, and this one not. Yeah, editors are a whole other story. I was one of them too for a little
this,
while, but
this feels like the spiritual prequel to Tropic Thunder. So if you like that film, I would definitely recommend watching State and Maine. Even if you didn't like Tropic Thunder, you should still watch State and Maine.
yes.
So guys, final thoughts on this.
I'm just glad that you recommended it. I wasn't even aware of this movie. Not only had I not seen it, I had never heard of it. So
Wow.
I was happy to get a nice little surprise.
Well, hopefully a lot of people in our audience are in that condition now and won't be after they go look at it. And it's out there, easy to find. And go see Heist too. Oh man, much harder hitting, much tougher in some places, certainly bloodier. But you want to see Gene Hackman showing you why he's Gene Hackman. Boy, that movie is it. That movie is it.
It occurs to me we've been choosing a lot of films with titles that if you would just read them in a book somewhere, you'd think, wow, that sounds like a really boring film. State and Maine, North by Northwest.
What if they were? We could do
Ice Station, like like
Well, I think that's part of the fun. Is
Yeah.
the idea? I think here is to try and find, well, not necessarily unknown movies, things that are maybe a little bit older sometimes, and that are great examples of cinema that maybe the general audience doesn't necessarily know about. So,
Well,
uh,
titling a movie is also an interesting art form. I knew a guy once who wrote a fairly successful series of fantasy novels about wizards and things like that. And Disney actually picked up the option to make them into movies. They never did. But the title of the first book I forget what it is now, or if I knew, I'd be happy to tell you. But it was this very sort of strange, esoteric title, and he told me this story, and whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But he says the guy from Disney came in and he said, "Look, we love it. We want to buy it. We're going to give you a lot of money. We're going to make a movie." But the title is where this is Disney. You know, if we make a movie about a pretty woman, we call it Pretty Woman. If we make a movie about Steamboat Willie, we call it Steamboat Willie. We're about straight up. And this guy looked at him and said, "It's a good thing you didn't make Rain Man. You would have called it My Brother the Mental Patient." Uh, and I cleaned that up with the R word was what he used. But sometimes marketing is a whole other story as far as titles. And well, of course, once you get a series going, then you're Live Free and Die Hard with a Vengeance, and all those possibilities. But it
Well,
would be an interesting film festival of strange titles, great movies. Speaking of film festivals, can we give something away we've talked about in the past? Folks, stay with us. We're going to keep doing this until you get bored with us, which I hope you never will. But we had this interesting idea of what to do for April Fools.
I was just about to go there.
Tommy, as a joke in our back channel discussions, said, "Oh, I have a perfect movie for us. Let's do the Spice Girls movie and talk about the angst and the
Cultural
drama in the back."
impact of
And we all
Spice
laughed and
World.
said, "Oh, he's kidding." And then I thought, well, wait a minute. Each of us surely has a movie we think is the best worst movie we've ever seen. We should do those as a triple threat for April Fools, where each of us has to watch the other people's bad movies, and all of us can gang up on them.
Lorn, I see that
don't-
face.
I don't like this idea because I know what you guys are going to pick. Because I
Why?
already
What do you-
told you the
What do you think? What would you pick?
Yeah.
what would I pick is like the worst movie?
Your
Well,
favorite awful
I-
movie? Yes.
That's the thing is that I would I would pick the same one that I think you guys would pick because you want me to see it.
No,
and
no.
I'm going to get roasted alive for this because I know a lot of people love this movie. I despise The Fifth Element. I hate that movie. It is the first movie in my life that I ever wanted to walk out of,
Wow.
and I couldn't because I had actually driven a friend of mine there, and he was enjoying the movie,
Yeah.
so I couldn't leave, and I was forced to watch that monstrosity.
That's funny because there's a friend of mine on Facebook who, how shall I put this delicately? She thinks she's really hot, and she puts pictures of herself in all of these very scanty costumes. And she recently put one up in a very abbreviated blue lingerie outfit. And I showed her a picture. I said, "You know what you look like? You're the stewardess on the ship to Fluston Paradise." And she looked just like. I said, "All you need is the hat." So, but well, I'll tell
Lorn,
you
I
what.
can see that vein throbbing in your head.
It's okay. It's okay because you might convince us. You never know.
Yeah.
It's one of my wife's favorite movies. I will tell you that. But
I
no,
loved it.
I like it.
Yeah.
But no, mine. Well, what's yours, Tommy?
Well, you know what? I might have to force you guys to watch Battlefield Earth with
Oh
John
God.
Travolta.
Oh God.
Why are we doing this?
Maybe this is all we have to do. But I'll tell you mine. This is the movie that I would call the greatest cast ever assembled to make a terrible movie. I want to give you the cast first. And I want you to remember all of these people are in this movie. Gregory Peck, Omar Sharif, Telly Savalas, Julie Newmar, Keenan Wynn, Lee J. Cobb, Ted Cassidy, Eli Wallach, Edward G. Robinson, Burgess Meredith, Raymond Massey, Anthony Quayle, Victor Jory, and it's awful. It's awful, 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 and it's huge. And it's called McKenna's Gold. And it is a terrible, awful Western shot in Bryce Canyon with these beautiful... Oh, and it has this theme song sung by Jose Feliciano that's all about old turkey buzzard flying, looking for dead people in the desert, right? And so my wife
my
and I
God.
call the movie Old Turkey Buzzard. and it has another strange claim to fame. If you ever wondered how come Julie Newmar didn't play the Catwoman in the next season of Batman and Eartha Kitt filled in, the answer is she was committed to this movie where her whole job was to swim naked in a desert pool as an Indian princess so they could put the pictures in Playboy to promote the movie.
Well, that's
I think
that's a heck of a cast. I
We
mean,
have-
that's
I'm
this
telling
movie.
you,
Oh
you're going to
my
look at the
God.
cast and say, how could this be bad? Oh, believe me, it could be really, 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 really bad.
Lou, we might not be able to wait till April for this. I'm really kind of chomping at the bit now.
we can wait.
Well, you can watch it. You don't have to. We don't have to do it here. But
All right.
and J. Lee Thompson directed it, and it's oh God, is it? Oh, and I love the online community. We embrace you, we love you, but some of you ask the stupidest questions. When you look up a movie, you get people also ask. Here's one: was this based on a true story? And I'm going, no. Is it a good movie? Here's IMDb says there are a few effective scenes, like the arrival at the valley and the gold fever, but overall, it's sadly mediocre. Oh, it's much worse than that.
All right.
It's much worse than that. Anyway, enough about that.
I got to
Terrible.
see this.
So it's
Tommy, you seem to enjoy doing this, and I just want to know why. Why would you do this to us?
I am a table with anger issues, Lorn.
yeah. He's just,
Well, guys,
we got to put a matchbook under one of those tables because you're wobbling. You got a short.
I know. Well,
anyway, we've blathered on enough. Everybody, forget all that. Go see State and Maine. Go see
yes.
And get Mamet's book.
Yes, get the book. Get the book. I bought it. I love it. Get it. So, guys, thank you once again for another fantastic genre, guys. This movie was a real treat, a real delight, and it was even more of a delight to be able to talk to you both about it. Audience members, people who are listening, give us your thoughts down below. Please leave your comments. We love them. We read them all. If you have any suggestions for movies to watch or to cover, or if you have any suggestions for the worst movies for us to watch, in a terrible movie marathon,
stick to the good ones. But as much as we love the really, really famous classics, I mean, a lot of people have suggested like Casablanca. Well, of course, Casablanca is a great movie, but there's kind of a level at which it's been talked about so much that I don't know how much we can bring to it other than reminding you of everything everybody else has said. Whereas other ones with big people and famous casts and everything else that are great may be a little more overlooked. And I think in a way that's what we're kind of looking for too. I think.
Indeed. And on that note, I think we will all bid you an adieu wherever you are, and hope to see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place, for all the news that should be fun.